Okay, what was your question again? About the breathing, right?
Yeah, the breathing for the overweight specifically,
Yeah.
the connection to that, and some of the other breathing practices we do, the breath yoga one being the most specific.
In the overweight treatment, what we want to do, we want to achieve some physical results. It has nothing to do with the dantian or anything like this, just the location of the dantian is in the belly.
But you did mention it's also reverse breathing. So
It is called reverse breathing by modern people, Western Qigong practitioners, right? And in Wushu people also do that because they want to create this core feeling in their belly, and they want to really contract, and they want to compete with bodybuilders, with people who work with machines and stuff like this. So in Taoism in general, the idea is that there is a sort of natural process of the body, and you have to wait for the opportune moment to seize it, right? So at the moment when you are doing breathing practices, like we are paying attention to the dantian, what we want to achieve, we want to restore the relationship between the kidneys and the lungs. For most people, this relationship is disturbed, and therefore they have short breath, anxieties, all kinds of other things. Emotional disbalances can even lead up to psychosis and so on, right? Because of being overexcited. But at the moment, when we talk about dantian meditation, basically what we want to do is to create a discipline in which we are waiting for the breath to reconnect. And because you can't force the connection between the lungs and the kidneys. It's a biological process, and it takes time. That's why we have the 100-day meditation cycle. Because the moment you do this 100-day meditation cycle, you gradually set time apart every day, where you're going to pay attention to that, and you follow the natural flow of your body, which biologically seen, on biological timing, requires you to wait for the circulation of your blood to go through your body at least 4 times for every sequence. So that you do something, your body notices, gives a feedback, makes a correction, and then your body changes, right? So that's 4 steps. But then in the next half-hour cycle, because the cycle is half hour about, so the next half-hour cycle, you go through the same thing. And so the longer you meditate, the more cycles you go through, the more fine-tune you can do, right? That's why the idea of 10 minutes meditation a day is absolute nonsense. It has nothing to do with anything.
So half an hour is how long it takes one cycle for?
One cycle, yeah. One correction cycle. Yeah, so that is then more and more and more. So if you every day take 1 hour for meditation, then at that moment you have this build-up from the dantian where you connect, and as a result that you feel that your breath is originating from your dantian. So it's not going towards your dantian. We talked about that before also, where it's like in Indian yoga you breathe from your throat, and then in this case you wait for that so that your body actually asks for breathing. So it's not like you're breathing, not like an automatic lung mechanism, but your belly asks for the breathing so that the lungs get saturated in the way where the whole lung is being filled, and therefore the whole body gets, well, more oxygenation, basically in the Western sense, but also nitrogenation, and also the level of carbon dioxide in your body, carbon in general in your body can be regulated. So when people have fat bodies, overweight bodies, they have too much carbon in their body. So this is one of the reasons why they grow overweight. And so you have to get rid of that. And that carbon comes in through eating, right? So it's not that just diseases create overweight, but it is also the fact that your diet brings in the carbon that the diseases set up into fat tissue. So it's not necessarily that you eat too much. So even if you eat a little, you could still grow overweight because of that process. But at the moment when you correct that process, then the whole biological process gradually gets a reset. So if you keep on doing that day by day by day by day, your body gradually normalizes to what it should be. The mechanisms turn into what they should be. And this is what is missing with most people. And at the moment when you do a forced breathing, that means that you take control. That's called militarized breathing, military breathing in Taoism. And what we call dantian breathing is civil breathing. The civil breathing is a patience breathing. Well, military breathing is an impatience breathing. You can call it like that. So you try to force your way. So what we do with the overweight treatment is that we force the breath down into the belly and we squeeze the belly. And of course, because the dantian is there, you can take it as a focal point where you pull the muscles towards when you know about it. But when you're just a client and you don't know about dantian, you have no idea what you're doing. So it doesn't matter. Then only taking control over the muscles is at that moment important, because at the moment you take control over the muscles, you squeeze out the fat from the muscles, but you also stimulate the needle tips on the belly so that it pushes actually the formation of blood vessels. And that takes time. I'm not really sure about the timing, but the reason why we do 3 months as a basic treatment cycle is because at least 3 months it takes to build maybe a few millimeters of blood vessels in your body. And that allows for a little bit of fat emptying, and that allows also for a little bit more fat to come close to the artery, so that you gradually build up more loss of fat tissue. That's why after 3 months you still have about 3 months where the process continues, and then it gradually slows down. So you have to push as much as possible in the acupuncture, and you have to push as much as possible with the breathing to be able to produce these blood vessels. At the same time, because of doing this breathing, and you breathe out, then also you get rid of more carbon which is inside your blood, right? So as a result of that, you also offset a little bit the absorption of carbon in your body by breathing out. So this is a main difference. And this military breathing is what you see nowadays in Western Qigong a lot. Because people are infected by this idea from the gym that you have to have a core body, you have to have a six-pack. And you see this in these Mad Muscles advertisements. Right, they talk, I don't know if you've ever seen those, but you've probably seen them because they're everywhere. And they promote a video course where you get every day, you get an exercise, and then you continue buying, and before you know it, you have spent €6,000 because it's
there's so much on social media and so many people.
Yeah. But yeah, these are trick buyings, and they use exercises that they find on the internet, and then they just put them into an algorithm to digitalize them and then to redo them so that you can do them. There's a lot of AI and that kind of things involved, and that's possible nowadays. And so if people fall for that, they also fall into a commercial trap at the same time. And they do things which are basically developed by the Chinese military. They're not Daoist or something like this. So this is what you see happening a lot. And this militarization of these exercises is partly created by the Chinese government. And it's partly created by these fanatics who are going to the gym, and they would like to do something which is less intense than the gym, but they still want to keep their big muscles, right? So they also seduce people with the idea that you get big muscles when you do these kind of things, because when you tense your muscles, they build. You know, that's always going to happen. So if you tense your belly muscles, of course they build, and if you're already very lean, you get a six-pack at a certain point. But you don't need that six-pack because it also restricts your intestines to move freely. So Daoism says your belly should be relaxed and move freely. So if you have big muscles, or if you have a six-pack or something like this, that means that you have a problem with your intestines, likely.
I've heard someone in the Tai Chi world or sometimes say they have a big belly because they actually have a big dantian. Yeah,
they say, because they talk about this energy thing, and then you have this swelling feeling in the belly. And the thing is that I see this also with many of my teachers. They eat a lot of chicken legs, and as a result of that, they get a big belly. Because meat doesn't really decompose very well in your body. And everybody keeps saying like, but it only needs 3 days, but it's not true, because it keeps composting in your belly.
Even Daoist teachers say a lot of meat. I thought there was
a lot of people nowadays eat meat because they say like, yeah, but I practice kung fu, so I have to eat meat. And this is the modern myth. The desires comes up with all kind of excuses to do things, and so this is basically it. But
so that's a more intentional breathing specifically because of the.
Well, what happens at the moment? Then you see this also happening in the Daoyin breathing that we do. At the moment, when you breathe in and the dantian is filling up, it feels like there's a pressure that you're holding in. And in the Daoyin, we really allow that to go out and in to fill up our body and so on. But it doesn't mean that your body actually expands. If your body expands at that moment, that means you're producing gas, and then you have to fart a lot. Yeah, because that gas has to go somewhere. You can't keep it in because then you're going to rupture your intestines. So that cannot happen in the way that they do. But it feels like there's a balloon in your belly, but it doesn't mean that your belly is ballooning.
Are you talking about the breath yoga?
Talk about the sensation people talk about that the belly is bloating because of the dantian wall inside. Yeah, so this is coming from Yang Fu, who always came up with these kind of excuses, because he eats a lot. Yeah, he eats a lot, and there's a lot of Daoist masters, not Daoist masters, Tai Chi masters that used to eat a lot. They had a lot of celebrations because they were very famous. Everybody takes them for dinner, and they eat a lot. And Yang Fu was very famous for his huge belly. and that he was really leaning forward because of that belly, and that actually means that it is impossible to have Dantian development in Taoism. In Taoism, they say as soon as you have body fat, then your Dantian is going to be offset from the center, because the vertical axis is going to be disrupted. And because the vertical axis is going to be disrupted, you're going to lean forward because of your belly pushing forward. And as a result of that, there's a problem. What they did in TCM is they said the Dantian is a point 3 or 4 fingers below the umbilicus and 3-4 fingers in. But it is only true when you're thin. If you're not thin, you're fat, then 3 fingers, 4 fingers in, that's just in your fat layer. There's no Dantian in the fat layer. Because the Dantian is part of the kidneys and the midline.
The Dantian is
in the backside.
On the backside.
Well, it's not really in the backside, it's actually in the center if you are thin.
That's in front of the spine.
It's in front of the spine, yeah. Maybe in some ways you can say it's even in the spine if you're very thin, right? Because this space is not that big, right?
So it's behind all the organs.
Yes. And there's also a change happened in Taoism and Buddhism in the way how they envision Daoists. Because in the past they always said, like, you can recognize a Daoist on being very thin. That is a true practitioner. But nowadays they say, well, it's healthy to be a little bit fat. And so, because that means that you have a lot of reserves in your body, and that means you're very healthy. And it is true, if you have more body fat, you have more resistance against things like cold and stuff like this, as long as it's brown fat. But as soon as it becomes white fat, then it's a problem. And that's difficult to get rid of.
So then, thank you. So then as far as the breathing described now, that the overweight treatment breathing is more intentional, but generally, like in meditation, Tai Chi, we want the breathing to be more natural, coming just from the practice.
Yeah, it's a process work, right? So at the moment when you go into Dantian meditation, you're getting into a process to reshape your biology by waiting for the opportune moment to have some things happening and then make it into a pattern so that it becomes habitual. So if you talk about the Dantian is not really there. Yeah, there's this point, topologically you could point out this point in your body, but you wouldn't feel it. And so the Dantian is not naturally there. But what happens over time, because of that concentration, gradually you start having these natural contractions there, and you start to have churning of your intestines and stuff like this. You got this feeling of swelling and so on. So a lot of things happening because you want to get rid of all the dirt in your intestines. So this is the cleaning mechanism of your intestines. So as soon as your intestines are a bit empty because you eat very little, yes, you don't need much if you meditate a lot. Yeah, so then at that moment, because the churning, it gets more clear, so that the Dantian also becomes more clear.
What about the Mingmen? Is also
the Mingmen is always at the same place, so it's always there, but it's either open or closed. If it is a little bit closed, you will not have much problem. If it's very closed, then you're basically dead.
But it's not a physical structure that's there.
It's the opening between the vertebrae.
Oh.
And it allows for the mobility of your body, basically, but it also allows for the heating of the vertebrae in such a way that the water of the Renmai can steam up and then disperse warmth over your body. So very funny, because this is also related to the same thing. You see very often that people talk about Wei Qi, external Qi, right? And they talk about like, dude, these techniques are invented in the West as form of biomagnetism schools in the 18th, 19th century. I have a pile of books from that time that show that. And at that time in China there was nothing like that, but it was introduced, and it is nowadays called three-bath Qigong, or bath Qigong. So they create a sort of bath of energy between their palms, right? But the yang is on the outside, so what is between the palm cannot be the yang, but it is expanding, so it's a magnetic force, it's there. And when I go to do the Qigong video on Western schools, we go talk about that and how that has been integrated in the idea of Qigong, but how it's basically Western magnetizing. I've studied that too in the past because I started out with these kind of things. And at the moment when you actually want to feel the yang, you want to create a yang ball, actually the yang is here. Yes, the yang is not there. So at the moment when that happens, when the yang comes here, that's the yin. Right, it's going into the yin channel, which is also a form of yang, so no worry about that, but it's a different kind of yang. That's why we say, okay, you want to hold this ball, but it has to be 10,000 kilos heavy. If you have no Dantian, then you have no source for that sensation. And that's the Daoist part, right? At the moment when it becomes Western, it's just the energy between your palms, and then it will be there whether you have a dantian or not. And many people you see them practice all kind of things without ever having a dantian.
So then the breath yoga, that's a more intentional movement.
At the moment when we do the breath yoga, we absorb the emptiness of the sky, right? So then at that moment the emptiness is all around us, we breathe in, and this is filling up our body, and there we have to extract this emptiness, and we have to accept in such a way that we produce this pure yang, right? That we add to the yang of our own body in the dantian. So we are transforming the yin of our belly into the yang, and then we add extra yang to it until it becomes so strong that it actually can fire up the Mingmen, so that we can get the Duma and the Renmai circulating. What is called the Xiao Zhu Chen, the small heavenly circle. And that's the difference with, for instance, somebody like Mantak-Chia. Mantak-Chia wants you to visualize it, so that you have the feeling as if it's there, because your mind is projecting something, is creating something. It's the same like affirmations. Affirmations never really work. You may feel that they work sometimes, and that makes you maybe hypnotize yourself and think that they work all the time. But most of the affirmations that you do, they don't work. Yes, because things happen sometimes to you, sometimes good things, sometimes bad things. So there's a randomness in how things happen to you. You cannot guarantee success rate. That's also why magic is sometimes very insecure. Not all your magic works if you perform magic. Sometimes magic works because it would have happened anyway. Yes. But then just that you are more focused on it. What magic does, it helps you focus on particular kind of things, so that you have the feeling as if you have control over them. And it's the same with science. Science creates patterns, but you see with commercial science, they are predicting things that they want to see, and everything that they don't want to see, that they just delete, so that they are always right. So then they can prove that cigarettes are healthy, that not taking vaccinations is healthy, which in a way is healthy for some things, but it is not healthy for the things that they try to protect you against. So there's this doubleness always in science, and science can always be proven to do particular kind of things. And that is with magic the same, and that is with affirmations the same, and it's with hypnosis the same. It helps sometimes, you think, you feel, that doesn't necessarily mean. But what we do with Taoism, and that's the scientific principle behind there, we always wait until it naturally happens, so that we can gradually set up a pattern to make it repeat and make it come back. And all natural patterns, they go very slow, like the growth of a tree. That is why Yangshen and also Shushen, self-cultivation, and Daoland practice, they're always very slow as a process, because they imitate nature. And they follow the patterns of nature, and they're not forcing anything. Now, like if you look at the Western magic schools, for instance, Aleister Crowley, he thought that the theatrical event of a magical ritual was making a change. And somebody like Jung said, the magic is happening only in your mind. It doesn't really happen, but it's only in your mind. So it's a projection that you have in your mind. So he psychologized the esoteric, so to say. And where Crowley made it into theater. But the reality for Taoism is that all practices, they are gradual. And they go through different kind of stages. And I think part of the theory they took from Japanese Buddhism, because they talk about the Trikaya theory. Tibetan Buddhism also absorbed that, and the different schools of Buddhism, like the Pure Land school and the Chentai school, they also absorbed it. And they say, like, okay, when you start a process, there's always a process of accumulation of technique. And after you've done this accumulation of techniques over time, you have this building of experience. Yeah, so the first stage, the second stage, and the third stage. I will not bother you with the Buddhist names. But at the moment when you go through these stages, the first stage is you get acquainted with the technique. Like when you do the breath yoga, or when you do the practices for losing body weight. In the beginning it will be clumsy, it will be unpractical, and it will feel like a struggle. That's normal. If a practice doesn't feel like a struggle, then you already know it. And if you already know it on the beginning, before you start something, then probably you don't know it, but you try to erase all the details that feel like I don't want to feel that. And then you try to adapt the exercise to your abilities. In the second stage, you start to build a routine. Yes, and then at the moment when you build a routine, it becomes easy to do practice, it becomes easier to do practice. But in the third stage, you become an embodiment of it. And this is what we all the time try. In the Qigong, in the Dantian meditation, in the Taijiquan, you want to become an embodiment of something. And in Taijiquan, that embodiment is in the tantric assimilation of particular kind of Daoist principles, and as well as deities and so on and so on.
What is tantric? The way you use tantric, I don't quite understand.
It basically means the absorption of divine whatever kind of things. And that means that you relate to the cosmological reality of space around.
Cosmological reality.
Yeah, the religions, spiritualities, science, they're all based on a perception of reality as it is. As they see as it is, right? So for Taoism, that means that you have to become identified with the whole universe to become an immortal. For a Buddhist, that means you have to separate yourself from life to become a Buddha. Yes, and that means that you become absorbed in the principle of the Buddha without being a human anymore.
So then in Tai Chi, like you were just saying something about Tantra and Tai.
Yeah, what you do in Tai Chi, in the lowest level, you learn martial arts. Yes, in the higher level, it becomes a meditation. But in the highest level, you become like a god. And that's the part that almost nobody ever reaches. Yes. So, because that means you have to identify with a particular kind of god. And for the Wudang, that is Chengwu. So you create that kind of force inside you, and you have to become like a dead tree, moving. A moving dead tree. That's the purpose of Tai Chi.
But you can't describe what that is.
No, you cannot describe it. I've only seen it with one person so far. So when I later on, my teacher explained me, this is what you want to achieve. And everybody looked down on that person because he was also politically active. But he was also one of the people with the highest achievement in Tai Chi at that moment.
Is that the idea of something like you're kind of like non-reactive and non-stressed, sort of like a dead?
No, it's just like when he was moving. When I saw him do that, he was in a big sports hall. He was giving a demonstration. He only did one move, but it felt like the whole room was moving. Everybody was just looking like, what do we see? Right? Everybody recognized something's happening, but they didn't know what. But it was almost like a big shadow moves through the space, and the whole space seemed to change. That's a dead tree moving.
Okay, the word dead tree doesn't.
Yeah, that's just a symbol that in Taoism is being used for that.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's what most people don't know about Taijiquan. That's why they think like, it's just imitation from what family styles do. It's just martial arts. That's why they get stuck on that level. And they don't read the history. There's a lot of famous teachers. They don't know anything about history.
But it's well, again, those words, I don't know what they mean, but
words are important.
Yeah, dead tree. Okay.
It's an aspirational word, basically. So, okay, what does it mean? So it's a thought process that you gradually go through over your learning process, but somebody has to introduce it to you.
Okay. The part about martial arts I understand, the part about meditation I understand, but then also as I understand in Tai Chi, this is a part that a lot of teachers say doesn't exist, is you're working you call them the channel system, let's say, all the parts of acupuncture, all the things you treat, your organs, you're working those systems
on the lower level,
in yourself. You still call that a lower level.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's higher than martial arts.
The secret of, and we'll talk about it in the channel theory, there's only one channel, that's you. Yes, so that's it. We are so much used to dividing things up into all kinds of small parts, but there's only you, right? So that's the only thing, and all the other parts, they're only tools to make things work in a particular kind of way. So even in Western science, the heart is a pump, but that's not you. Like in Buddhism, they say your arm is not you, right? Similar like that. So there's only you.
Right.
So that's very simple. But you hear a lot of, also in China, you see a lot of teachers say like, when you're beginning, you shouldn't read too much, you shouldn't read any books, you just should practice, and then things will come. My own teacher said that also, but he emphasized that he has a library, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to understand Taijiquan. But what it is that most people, they don't have much physical connection with themselves. They don't understand what they are. right? So they don't understand the physical part, and as a result of that, they don't have any influence on their mental part too. That's why people are being driven by their desires. But if you don't control your body, you can't control your mind.
And then you say Tai Chi does require a lot of the other practices we do, the meditation, the different breath practices.
Yeah, Tai Chi is like a culmination, you can say. Culmination of a lot of different kind of other practices.
So that is a kind of study, even if, let's say, if you don't have access to all the library materials, do some of these other practices, would you say that is a form of study that goes into Tai Chi?
Yeah.
If you practice it more completely?
Nice example when you mentioned that, because Taijiquan in itself is usually performed in a slow fashion. There is also fast ways of practicing, but it's for more advanced students. But the Wooden Fitness, which is relatively fast, depending on your physical ability, has to prepare you for doing Taijiquan. Right? So being able to disconnect your breathing and your movements from each other makes that you can control your movement in Taijiquan better and achieve more in your Taijiquan. If you don't do that, Taijiquan is just slow movement, even if you develop your Dantian. Same for the Dantian meditation or the Bamboo form Qigong, where you move very slowly, but you continuously learn to shift your weight through your movements. And because of the symmetrical patterns, you learn to control the way how your weight moves through movements, and that has its effect also on Taijiquan. So because of the intensity of the movements, you learn to comport your body in a particular kind of way. So that's why there's no Daoist school which only has one practice, only Tai Chi. But what you see is that people learn forms in a similar kind of fashion that Buddhism complains that people only come to get initiations and they do a ritual and then they say like, but I'm a ritual initiate on this and that, but they don't practice these things for serious, because it takes a day by day effort. And if you have 3 initiations, that means you're busy for 6 hours a day. And so if people have 12 initiations, then it doesn't mean anything anymore, because these things are very often contradictory to each other. And it's the same with Daoist practices. That's why, like for instance, I saw this advertisement for Mad Muscles about Tai Chi walking. I've been teaching Tai Chi walking already for 30 years. And Tai Chi walking is a great thing. I don't know if they do the same like what I teach, but because I don't know what they do. But it is something that you can't learn without a teacher. You have to do it together with somebody. Because if you do Tai Chi walking in a city without a teacher, without somebody to take as an example, you might kill yourself by getting under a car.
Okay, I don't know what Tai Chi walking is.
Yeah, but that's it. It's an adaptation to your environment, but the environment in the city is very fast. So if you try to adapt to something that's faster than you, you don't understand. That means that you don't have good overview over your environment. Because Tai Chi walking is not about the walking, it's about the overview of the environment. So there's differences in things that people usually don't know, because they focus very much on the physical doing of things without actually understanding what it means. And that's with the overweight breathing, it's just a physical thing, right? When you do Dantian meditation, it is about correcting your physical body as a root for correcting your whole being. And so if you do Taijiquan, it is about being able to move to the space in a way how you do in a ritual, because Taijiquan is a ritual. But in a ritual, you bring a lot of things together. Yes. So this is basically what we do in Taijiquan. We bring all these practices together and we tie them up together and we manifest them in ourselves. And it means that if you also do rituals, you do particular kind of meditation, so like the meditation of the 3 pure ones, the gods of the body, and so on and so on. They all have to be inside. The Hun and the Po, if you do meditation on that, all these kind of things, they have to be inside. So that means that every day you have to pay attention to manifesting these things before you start practicing. So the moment when you were standing, before we do the Taijiquan, standing still, basically this is where we reassess everything that we learned. So that is all present in our Taijiquan. It's not about just the sinking and the paying attention to the outer form and the Dantian and the space around us, but it is reassessing everything that we learned and then bring everything together and then we do the Taijiquan.
It's just when you're standing at the beginning.
Yeah. So it's like a remembering moment, remembering everything. And that means that you have to go very quickly through these things, and you can only do it very quickly when you have good experience with practicing all these things. That's why I always make jokes about exercising 10 hours a day. Giving up your wife, your husband, your work, anything else. Just practice like this for 5 years and that will be okay.
Yeah, except they're not jokes. They're serious.
And not jokes, are serious.